let me just quickly share with you examples of how uh, the actual historical Imam Ali alayhi salam that emerges in Najh Al Balagha, his understanding, his political ideology, his view of the whole question of prophetic succession and how a leader and how an imam and caliph is supposed to be chosen after the Prophet ﷺ is radically different to the view that is maintained by most traditional 12 Imamiyya Shia today. And so the best example of that is letter number 6 of Najh Al Balagha to Muawiyah bin Abi Sufyan, in which Imam Ali alayhi salatu wasalam starts by saying, إِنَّهُ بَايَعَنِ الْقَوْمُ الَّذِينَ بَايَعُوا أَبَا بَكْرٍ وَعُمَرَ وَعُثْمَانَ عَلَى مَا بَايَعُوهُمْ عَلَيْهِ. That indeed the very people who swore allegiance to Abu Bakr, Umar, and Uthman, they are the same people who have sworn allegiance to me on the same grounds, on the same basis and terms and conditions on which they swore allegiance to them. So yani, he's basing the validity and legitimacy of his caliphate and his authority on the validity and legitimacy of the caliphs who came before him. He's saying the very same electorate that chose them has chosen me. So just as their government was valid and their authority was legitimate, in the same way my authority is legitimate on the same grounds. He says, and therefore the one who was present at that election after the consensus was reached had no choice to consider, and he who was absent had no right to reject. And then he says, وَإِنَّمَا الشُّورَى لِلْمُهَاجِرِينَ وَالْأَنصَارِ. Remember, shura and consultation is the right of the muhajirin and the ansar. Where is he deriving this from? From the sunnah of the Prophet. Whenever the Prophet ﷺ had to do shura on any important matter or affair of state, he would always bring the muhajirin and ansar, he would assemble them and then ask them for their opinion. So the Imam says this practice is supposed to continue after the Prophet. After the Prophet leaves us, there should be a shura between the muhajirin and ansar, and if they agree, فَإِنِ اجْتَمَعُوا عَلَى رَجُلٍ, if they agree on an individual and unanimously decide to take him as the Imam, the actual word that the Imam uses is وَسَمَّوْهُ إِمَامًا. So this is his theory of imama. That is the muhajirin and ansar who are supposed to gather together, have shura between them, and then arrive at a consensus. And with that consensus, if they declare somebody, if they name somebody the Imam, كَانَ ذَلِكَ لِلَّهِ رِضَى, then the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is secured, it is achieved. The pleasure of Allah lies in the choice of the muhajirin and ansar. Notice how different this is from the later sectarian Ghulu influence claims that it's actually not the muhajirin and ansar who are supposed to choose and vote, and rather it's supposed to be divinely mandated and divinely ordained, and the people have no choice in this matter. And then the Imam goes on to explain how فَإِنْ خَرَجَ عَنْ أَمْرِهِمْ خَارِجٌ بِطَعْنٍ أَوْ بِدْعَةٍ, if someone tries to come out of this consensus with an objection or with an innovation, with a new claim, رَدُّوهُ إِلَى مَا خَرَجَ مِنْهُ, then the muhajirin and ansar shall return him. They will try to persuade him to come back to the fold of the unanimous consensus. فَإِنْ أَبَى, if he still refuses, قَاتَلُوهُ عَلَى اتِّبَاعِهِ غَيْرَ سَبِيلِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ, they shall fight against him on grounds of him following a path other than the path of the believers. This is a reference to the verse 115 of Surah An-Nisa, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warns against forging a path that is different from the path of the community of the believers. So you can see how Imam Ali alayhi salam, in everything that he says and writes, he is mirroring and reflecting the rays of guidance that come to us from the Quran. And he warns, he says, وَوَاللَّهُ اللَّهُ مَا تَوَلَّى, anyone who turns away from the consensus of the muhajirin and ansar will be abandoned by Allah to his own devices. So I think right there, right off the bat, you can see, Sayyid Raza, Ustad, how Imam Ali alayhi salam's political ideology and his political theory and his understanding of how the caliph and imam is supposed to be chosen after the Prophet is radically different from what is the popular perception and the popular aqidah of many of the traditional 12-hour Imamiyya today.
So that khutbah is very go down for a minute, scroll down for a minute. I just want to, yeah, I thought so. Yeah.
This is the commentary of
No,
the traditional Imami commentator on this khutbah.
yeah. So I can always the reason why I said scroll down is because I knew the footnote was going to be bigger than the khutbah. Because I knew that khutbah was going to be so problematic that the footnote will be bigger than the khutbah, because this is where the acrobatics will start. You see, I said quick question on this. Naturally, I've obviously studied this. I'm not going to give you that much of an easy ride. The people that believe in the Imam Ali from the Shia community, they would say to you that this is Jawab al-Ilzam to Muawiyah, because he believes in this procedure of Khilafah. And I'm sure they probably mentioned that here as well. Yeah, look, there you go. It's there. As in,
Exactly.
it's just, I know there's so much. So yeah, yeah, gone.
Yeah, Amir al-Mu'mineen pointed out to him the recognized way of election and demolished his argument. It was a method known as arguing with the adversary on the basis of his wrong premises so as to demolish his argument, since Amir al-Mu'mineen never at any state regarded consultation with chiefs or the common vote to be the criterion of the validity of the caliphate. So basically, Imam Ali alayhi salam was simply min babi ilzam al-khasmi bima alzama bihi nafsahu, as they say, right? But this argument is falsified by Imam Ali's own statement. Look at what he says. He says, if the Muhajirin and Ansar unanimously and collectively agree on a person and declare him to be the Imam, he doesn't say, oh Muawiyah, then this should be acceptable to you by your wrong standards and by your deviant premises. He says, no, this is not about you, Muawiyah. This is not about the recognized and established system right now. This is about rida of Allah. Kana dhalika lillahi rida. It is the pleasure of Allah. The pleasure of Allah lies in the consensus of the Muhajirin and Ansar being respected in this matter. So that whoever they declare the Imam, the pleasure of Allah lies in accepting him as the ruler and as the leader after the Prophet ﷺ. And so his argument is that because now all of the Muhajirin and Ansar and their representatives have agreed and they have unanimously voted me and elected me as the leader, the pleasure of Allah lies in my authority now being accepted. And you, Muawiyah, have no grounds to challenge it, because you are neither from the Muhajirin nor are you from the Ansar. You are among the son of the Tulaqa. You are in Syria. You have no business with you have no role in this.
Yeah, you are.
Ansar have made their choice. You have to stay out of it, and you just have to accept whatever they have unanimously decided.
Okay, so if the context of this letter is quite clear, that basically it's to do with when Muawiyah was rejecting Imam Ali's Khilafah and his authority, Imam Ali wrote this letter to basically say to him, I was brought in the same way that my predecessors were brought in. Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman. The same way they were brought in, I was brought in. So how are you rejecting my authority? I came in the same way they did.
But do you understand, if Imam Ali alayhi salam believed that the previous caliphs, their rule was illegitimate, their government was invalid, then his own argument would be invalid. And Muawiyah would be the first to point out to him. He would say, wait a minute, according to you, the caliphate of the previous three caliphs should be invalid, right? Because you believe you're divinely appointed. So if you believe you're divinely appointed, their government is batil. So how come you are comparing your government and you're basing the legitimacy and validity of your government on a batil government?
And if they say to you it's Jawab al-Ilzam, you'll say, as you just pointed out, how can it be Jawab al-Ilzam when Imam Ali is saying Allah's pleased with it?
Aslan, if it was Jawab al-Ilzam, the structure, this is what we studied at the PhD level. We look at what the language is saying. What kind of language is he using? Is he using the language of al-Jawab al-Ilzam?
No, we know, because we know in Jawab we've had a couple of debates in our life. We know how Jawab al-Ilzam works. Jawab al-Ilzam, even if you don't say I'm doing it in Jawab al-Ilzam, the whole angle of argumentation makes it obvious that it's Jawab al-Ilzam.
Exactly. Because if this is not the case, if what Imam Ali alayhi salam is describing here is not the case, and Allah is not pleased by the choice of the Muhajirin and Ansar, what they decide upon collectively, then Imam Ali alayhi salam wal-iyadu billah just did iftira upon Allah. He just attributed a lie to God by saying that God is pleased with the decision, the collective unanimous decision of the Muhajirin and Ansar, when in reality God has no such policy of being pleased with their.
And again, Sayyid, why use the lesser argument when why not use the most? Again, if you've got a stronger argument of divine appointment, why use the lesser argument?
Absolutely.
If I'm
yeah.
divinely appointed, why am I using Jawab al-Izam tactics on Muawiyah? Say to him, listen, those three usurp my right. Now you're trying to do the same thing. Allah chose me, game over. Game over.
Exactly. But no, the whole point here is that Imam Ali bin Abi Talib alayhi salatu wasalam could never have done iftira upon Allah. He's not the kind of Imam who would lie against Allah just to score points or just to make a polemical argument against Muawiyah. This is his real belief. This is his real political view. This is why, and this is what he has derived from the Quran, by the way, because what he's saying, a lot of people don't realize this. But when Imam Ali alayhi salam is promoting shura, why is he doing so? We actually accept this letter not simply on Rijali grounds. We actually accept it because its content is authenticated by the Quran. Don't you see how shura, as a practice of mutual consultation and collective deliberation in the process of decision making, is something that is firmly rooted in the Quran? It is the full support and backing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran. So that when Imam Ali alayhi salam says that this is pleasing to Allah, he is not saying something strange or out of the ordinary or something that has no basis in the Quran. No, in the Quran we find that shura is not only promoted merely as an option that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is given by Allah. Rather, it is framed as a divine command. It's an imperative. It's a special recommendation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as you observe in the verse of Surah Ali Imran, Surah number 3 of the Quran, verse 159, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, addressing the Prophet, says, فَاعْفُ عَنْهُمْ وَاسْتَغْفِرْ لَهُمْ وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ. O Prophet, when it comes to your dealings with the companions, pardon them, forgive them, do istighfar for them, وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ, and consult with them in important affairs of state. فَإِذَا عَزَمْتَ فَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ. Then when you have determined on taking a certain course of action, then you rely upon Allah. Indeed, Allah loves those who rely upon Him. So this verse highlights how even Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was not exempt from the command to hold shura, despite being a messenger of God and having access to divine revelation and guidance. He's still instructed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to consult with the sahaba, with the muhajirin and ansar, to seek their input before taking important decisions pertaining to matters of state. And he's ordered to uphold and adopt the principle of mutual consultation and forgiveness and reliance upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the same way, you have the verse in Surah Shura where Allah describes the believers and He says, وَأَمْرُهُمْ شُورَ بَيْنَهُمْ. The believers are characterized by their tendency to hold shura in all their important affairs. So when Imam Ali alayhi salam is saying that the leader after the Holy Prophet has to be chosen through shura, he's not saying something that's strange or out of the ordinary. Rather, he's reflecting and mirroring the worldview of the Quran.
So this is why I'm very glad that I've got you here today, because and the viewers and for the critiquers out there, I'm very happy that this is something that you do have a part of your PhD on. So when they say, oh, he's not an expert, I hope on this one they can't say that. Just maybe they might on this one say he kind of is an expert, but he's just a deviant. as in the end we know where everyone goes. So said, thank you.
With your permission, Sayyidi, I want to showcase one more evidence, because again,
no problem.
One letter is not enough. There is so much more evidence, but I will not go into so much of it. One more, if you permit me to present.
I'll permit you, but before I do that, I will say that the whole point of you showing these letters is to show that Najh Al Balagha is with us.
Is with us.
Najh Al Balagha is with
the historical Imam Ali bin Abi Talib alayhi salam. In fact, we are with him, I would say. I mean, we started out from a traditional background. What brought us to where we are today? It's basically studying the historical Imam Ali alayhi salatu wasalam. Just as Christians who study the historical Jesus realize that he did not believe in Trinity, he did not believe he was the Son of God.
Yes, when people from the Sunni background sometimes become Shia, they say it's a very common kind of saying, which you've probably heard. Oh, I became Shia by reading Bukhari. Have you ever heard that? It's a very kind of common. So it's like, well, we learned the real Imam Ali from Najh Al Balagha.
Absolutely.
It's the same thing.